Hello everybody, this is Red Kiki. I'm here with Magadansky. We're going to do a quick recap because I'm an idiot. We had some technical difficulties last time. So I'm here to talk about the specific challenges of fighting human and particularly tanks as the undead race. And I have Magadansky here. Hello Maga.
Hi everybody, hi RTK.
So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions on your thoughts behind fighting human and fighting tanks. So let's just get straight into it. So some basic thoughts on how to fight human, just overall in general. What are some of the key things that you have to remember when going up against a good human player? We'll start off like that.
Okay, so what you must not let the human have is high level heroes versus undead, especially because if the Mountain King or the Paladin reaches a very high level, usually you're pretty much dead, or at least have a significant disadvantage. Plus, you'd have to use the fact that the human is taking much slower than undead, so it's slower human neighbor. You can easily rush him out, and I would suggest this because in late game you might be facing a human with a lot of tanks just sitting right next to you, which is often not good.
Cool. Um, so let's see. What did we talk about right after that? Um, so. Uh, So when fighting tanks, what are some general guidelines, and then we'll get into some specific questions. I have that. What do you do about what do you do when you're fighting tanks? What are some general things to consider and remember?
General things to consider is first of all the map. If you have a map that has a very wide open area around your main base, usually this means that fighting against tanks will be your worst nightmare because they can go from every direction, and usually a good human player will split them. So you'll fight the Griffin army while in the same time some tanks will just destroy your buildings from behind. But some other maps do have just one entrance, like Marketplace, for example, or Death Rows. They're good maps when you have to fight tanks because that way you can, first of all, focus them pretty easily. You can scout also in an easier manner, so you know when you have to face them.
Hmm.
And the most important thing when you have to fight tanks is first of all, of course, not letting the human mass teleport in your main, but also knowing that they're coming. If you have a lot of time to prepare, usually you would push them back.
And so when you know the human has mass teleport, every free-for-all player should know to check out for those critters. But also, do you recommend, keeping a shade around the entrances to your base, or on patrol if there's a large entrance to watch for invisible things?
Yes, definitely. For example, in the maps like Twilight Ruins with the wide open space, just have two shades
Two
that they're
shades.
patrolling all around your main,
Hmm.
and even I would say have something like a distant building or something like this that can scout also for critters that are nearby your main,
Hmm.
because sometimes uh, players put a pig, for example, just a couple of screens away from your main, so that they can um, simply go to your main without engaging your army because they'll know that you have scouted, and then that would engage long before the tank army eventually arrives.
Hmm.
But yeah, you need to scout also the perimeter around your base for that.
Right, so the mobility of the undead army is one of the strengths that it has when fighting humans because the tanks take a long time to get there. When we're talking about a little bit before we were having technical difficulties, we were talking a little bit about Meatwagon usage and
Mhm.
where you should position them in your base and how to micro them, how many you should have. Let's start just with how do you recommend using your meat wagons when the tanks are approaching your base? Should you leave them in the back or nearby? Should you shift click or just hold position? What do you recommend?
If you are fighting a human in around the map, not in their main base or in your main base, then I would suggest leave the tanks away, because that leave the wagons away. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Leave the wagons away, like in your main base. Not Don't get them with your main army, because this way you can rely on your mobility much easier, because wagons are as slow as tanks. So if you have to fight a human with a lot of tanks and griffins, for example, you can just easily snipe a griffin or two, or just uh, try to kill something, whatever. While if you have the wagons with you as well, this means that you would have to engage. Otherwise, whenever you go back, the wagons will be dead.
Hmm.
When you have to fight tanks approaching your main in your main base, I would suggest remove the wagons from your control groups. Just have them quickly shift attacking all the tanks that you see, and just keep them in the back, keep them somewhere that they wouldn't be easy to reach from the griffins. Of course, defend with the fiends, with the gargoyles, but don't include them in any control group, because during the microfights, you'll forget about them. I'm certain about this, and this way you won't have wagons attacking the Archmage, for example, which is totally pointless.
Right.
So that's
Cool.
why.
So, in terms of base layout, a little bit before we were talking about, um, what do you recommend in terms of where you should put your ziggurats and which type of towers you should upgrade them to? Should you do spirit towers or cold towers? And should
Mhm.
they be surrounding your black citadel, or should they be towards the front of the base? What do you recommend?
First of all, depends how many human opponents you have. If you have just one, then, for example, on every four ziggurats, just make one cold tower. But if you have more, like two or three, then I would suggest 50-50, or even the majority should be cold towers. Because spirit towers are not very good towers. They're not very efficient. They don't do any significant damage. So just use the cold effect to its maximum when a human army, for example, is approaching, especially on tanks. It slows them significantly. So
Hmm.
I believe it's much better.
So when you're fighting tanks out in the open, do you recommend more of a hit and run strategy, or do you recommend going sort of head on and trying to take them down in an all-out fight?
Depends what kind of army you have. For example, if you have fiends and worms, yeah, then you can try to take the human army heads on, because the worm takes a lot of time to be killed from tanks, and of course you can easily just coil or just micro him away. But if you have gargoyles, destroyers, and worms, just pure air, then I strongly suggest just to try to hit and run, kill whatever you can, avoid the fight until it's necessary, because tanks can just snipe your air in a matter of seconds.
Hmm.
So
Right.
heads
And then,
on rarely works.
yeah. And when you're fighting a human army, what army composition do you like to use, or does it depend on what they have? What's your preferred army to fight with, and the proportions thereof?
Well, nowadays I see that more human players are relying on breakers and tanks without much griffins. And this army is hard for undead, because you cannot nuke anything, more or less. So you need some abominations to take care of the breakers. Also, get some fiends, or gargoyles can work, but it's more risky. So more or less ground army with destroyers and worms.
Hmm.
Um, this way is more efficient. But if you're against the typical Griffin tank army, then you'll need like one control group of gargoyles in order to be sure that the Griffins would not be much of a threat, especially when they focus down your Death Knight or whatever.
So then when you're fighting an undead army, or sorry, a human army, let's start with the breaker tank army that you first talked about. What do you target first? What do you want to make sure is attacking what? Do you want to try to nuke down the heroes? Do you want to kill one breaker at a time? Focus the tanks? Obviously, it'll probably depend, but what do you like to? What's the biggest threat? What do you want to get rid of first?
Hmm. Well, well, depends again. If the Archmage, for example, is low level and with low hit points, while your heroes are have enough levels and nuke to just kill him immediately, then I would suggest just kill the Archmage as quick as possible. But otherwise, I would say just use your army to its full potential. Gargs should be against griffins. Abominations attack breakers. Feeds attack griffins as well. Wagons and worms attacking tanks. And this is this is the most efficient way. Focusing down breakers, not focusing down tanks with gargoyles or fiends is just not as good as just killing the griffins as fast as possible.
Hmm. And once the griffins are dead, then you can start to pick off the tanks, but not until after. When you're fighting in your base and the tanks are killing your base, do you recommend switching to them, or you still have to follow the same procedure? Don't worry about the tanks, just let them kill and get your meat wagons on them. And when your base dies, you have to keep rebuilding it, and that's just one of the challenges. Or should you sort of switch to trying to kill the tanks before they kill your base?
Um, you cannot kill the tanks before they start killing your base. I mean, you can have as much as gargoyles as you wish, and you cannot kill them as quick as possible. So, yeah, kill the griffins because otherwise, if you don't, a good human player will just snipe your wagons, and then you're in even greater trouble. I mean, then you have to worry for focusing down your heroes and stuff like that. At least if you lose like half of your main, it's still better than just losing the game, losing your heroes, losing the main after.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So, I've seen a number of different players using a different number of frostworms when they're fighting against tanks. How many frostworms do you like to use? Just one, two, three? How many are good versus primarily tank army with a little support of either breakers or griffins?
Um, well, worms are nice in like not more than two, because humans have hawks. So if you cannot sleep or kill the hawks immediately, then the worms will be pretty much disabled from the main fight. Also, I like to use them either for focusing down heroes or slowing down the tanks. Don't use them to kill griffins or stuff like that, since they don't do as much damage and they're not as efficient. Um, Usually, if I have a 100 food army, human army approaching,
Hmm.
I'll try to split my worms, attacking different groups of tanks so that they're slowed down. Usually, since the AI of tanks is pretty stupid, they start to dance around and
Hmm.
don't attack buildings or attack the worms and stuff like that. So it's good to mess the AI of the tanks with them as well.
Hmm.
With the rest of your army, just focus down the griffins, breakers, heroes, whatever.
Hmm. Cool. Let me see here. What else did I want to know? We have. So, when you're when you're fighting against a primarily tank army, one of the things that I like to keep in mind when I'm fighting as Night Elf with the primarily Chim army is that I want to keep the tanks so that they're all bunched up and only a couple of them are attacking at a time, keeping my chimeras my chims at a maximum distance from the tanks so that fewer of them can attack. Is that sort of one of the rules that you want to follow as undead, or do you want to get in there, fight something, and then stone form, or like let the frostworm tank and try to kite the gargoyles around? What's the like positioning? What's your recommendation in terms of positioning the undead army while fighting against tanks?
Again, depends on the map, but let's say it's an open map or it's somewhere in the middle of any map, and it doesn't matter of the main base positioning. Um, then it is important to know the exact number of tanks. For example, if it's just 5 or 6, you can go with all your gargoyles and just snipe whatever the air as quickly as possible. Just frost nova the air, carry on, and then snipe the air quickly before stone forming. But if there are more tanks, then it's more or less a positioning game. You would like to have the human not losing. How to say it? Like the griffins should be not protected by the tanks
Haha,
and stuff like that. You try to
catch them
lure
in the
him
content.
out. Yeah, you try to lure him out from the tank defense. Otherwise, it's very difficult.
Hmm.
Of course, you can have like fiend army and try to use the web potential, but
Hmm.
it's harder in my opinion, especially if the human heroes are high.
Yeah, if the human heroes are high, that makes fiends a lot worse, probably. Um, cool. So I want to take just a second here towards the end. We're gonna wrap up in a few here. I'm going back and forth between the Twitch page and the Free For All Masters League web page. Are there any requests, questions from the audience, from the listeners here? We only have a couple listeners right now, but are there any listener questions that they have for Magadansky here? Give them an opportunity to think about their questions. In the meantime, I was just thinking that it might be good to have a little recap here. So, in terms of army composition, we like to have sort of a against the breaker breaker tank with a few griffin army. We like to stick to sort of an abomination, maybe some fiends army. Whereas when there's more griffins, we want to add some gargoyles. When we have a base layout, we're against more human players. We want to have some more cold towers. Um, what do you recommend in terms of preferred fighting against mass teleport? I think that's probably a good thing to discuss here. Against mass teleport, do you want to sort of camp your base? Do you want to go and try to catch them? Scout? What are the first things to prioritize against a mass teleport? Start manipulation.
Well, manipulation works against everything, but I never like to just camp my base because if you also camp against a human player who has mass teleport, this means that he can reach your base as well. I mean, you can camp there, but he'll reach it eventually. There is nothing stopping him.
Hmm.
Wow, if you just scout and try to block all the entrances, all the critters killed, all the invisible units spotted before he can mass teleport, then you should just use this advantage. Also, you can bring the fight into their main, just kill some towers, focus down the castle.
Hmm.
Um, if I would say, if you can trade castle for a black citadel, do it. I mean, the black citadel is not as important as the castle for the
Right,
humans.
right. Well, that's great. Um, let's see. I have one last question here, and it was can't even remember. um, Okay, so any closing thoughts? The audience is sleeping, so they don't have anything to ask. But any closing thoughts from you, Maga? Some just like last minute rule of thumb things when fighting against tanks that you want to add that I haven't asked about already?
Hmm, difficult. Well, if you have a human player who you know is rich, You know his base is very strong, and you know that he has mass teleport and can destroy your base in a matter of seconds. Well, team him down. This is what I would say.
Always a good
Use your
choice.
ally. Yeah.
Team Team the human. That's sort of a universal thought, but especially for an undead player, I can understand that. Um, Last question for me. I just remembered it. I seen a couple times you and some other undead players putting like proxy necropolises around outside of the expansions and sort of extra ones at the front, extra ones sort of around, not right next to the bases. What's the importance of that? Why do you guys do that?
Number of reasons. First is that you can scout and you can, believe that you saw all the critters and all the invisible units, but sometimes you just missed one peasant going in your main base, invisible, and suddenly you have like 12 tanks destroying all your buildings. So what the human player usually focuses down first is, of course, the citadel.
Hmm.
And if you have just one citadel in your main base, this means that you cannot teleport back, and this means that your whole main base is destroyed before you can reach it. So that's why you have to have some other necropolis on which you can teleport and save at least half of your base. Also, it is good to have a wider base, because that way you can spot critters that are in the perimeter of the base, or just use the vision when a human army is approaching, etc. It gives you sometimes valuable seconds.
Hmm.
It's,
Great. Great advice. All right. Well, thanks for joining us here, Mega, and giving us your feedback on one of the more difficult matches in free for all. And good luck
well,
in your most likely finals. I think looking at the points, it looks like you're more or less guaranteed. But good luck in season 16, and thanks for joining us.
thank you, RKK. Well, cheers everybody, and yeah, let me say the final word. If
Okay.
somebody wants to play a game, just let's do it.
Game. Game. All
Yeah,
right.
game.
All right.
All
See you
right.
later.
See ya. Bye.